I apologize ahead of time because I didn't go back and look up the exact date, but it would have been either, I don't think it was 2009, I think it was in November of 2008 when I was on staff at the Southside Church of Christ over in Rogers, and we hosted our first ever community giveaway. And we spent months. Bobby, you remember this? I don't know if you remember what year it was for sure. Bobby Ricker was one of the ones that really spearheaded that thing. And we collected items for months. We had a couple of those storage sheds that we put on our parking lot. And people just donated stuff that they would, clean out their house or maybe, sell in a garage sale or whatever. Just bring it, and we just gave it away for free. And we advertised to the community. And hundreds of people showed up. And, man, they picked it clean. I mean, there was hardly anything left. We ran out of stuff to give people, some people that had some needs. As a matter of fact, there was one particular family that we found out that was living in an apartment and had, I think they had a couch, maybe a chair. That was about it. Needed a washer and dryer. Needed a bed for elementary age son to sleep on, because at the time he'd sleep on a sleeping bag on a tile floor. And so we actually, at the end of the day, we made some phone calls and went around and got some things put together for them. And this woman who we helped out, she was divorced, taking care of her son. Her ex-husband had moved back in, at least temporarily. It was a weird family situation. And she showed up. This is all on a Saturday. She showed up at church that Sunday. And as I said, this is November. It's kind of cool outside. And she came in what she had to wear, which was some kind of sleeveless thing that probably was more revealing than it needed to be, and some knee-length shorts and some flip-flops. And she showed up. And we were so excited to see her. And my wife was talking to her because she had met her the day before. She's like, thanks for coming, showing her where to take her son to class. And I'm so glad you're here. And she said, my ex-husband would have come, but, he's just didn't think he had anything to wear to church. And just that little statement just kind of hurt a little bit. Because if anybody needed to be around a group of people that were accepting and loving no matter what, these people needed to be there. And yet, unintentionally, we had created this stigma, I guess, where you had to have a certain look or be a certain way before you could ever even come in the front door in the first place. And it made me realize that that's what I don't think that anybody at Southside at that time, I don't think anybody here at Flagstone ever intentionally thinks, I'm going to make sure that I block somebody from coming to church. I want to make sure that I create some kind of attitude or some kind of environment where they don't feel welcome and don't feel like they can be here. There's nobody in our church family that would say that. And yet sometimes that's the assumption that people have about us. I've come to realize over the last several years that people can, because of their church experiences in the past or because of just their assumptions, they can look at us church people and just assume that we don't have any real problems. We don't have any struggles like other people deal with. That we show up on Sundays and on Wednesdays and whatever other days we show up for, and we've got our act together and everything's great. And we don't have addictions, and we don't have marriage issues, and we don't have parenting failures, and we don't have financial problems, and we don't struggle with doubt, and we don't live under this constant fear that we're just messing everything up. We've got it all together. And because of past experiences at other churches, people sometimes feel that way about every church. I mean, let's be honest. People at different churches have made non-church people feel that way before. Or it's just an assumption that people have, it's a misperception that people have about church folks, and assume that we that show up on a regular basis, they're not good enough to be one of us. Or we don't know what it's like to be where they are. So because of this, I wanted our church family and our guests, anybody that we invite, anybody that shows up on our doorstep, I want us to spend the next few weeks me doing less of the talking and letting our church family share some of their stories. Stories of struggles, stories of just dumb choices, stories of regret and of questioning, stories of renewal and answered prayers and brand new starts. I want all of us, I want all of our Flagstone family, I want our guests and people looking for a church home and people looking for a place to belong to see this is us. We don't all have our act together. We've all got flaws and we've all got mistakes, and we should probably quit trying to put on the front that we put on sometimes and be a little bit more real with each other. But this is us. This is honestly who we are. These are our church folks. This is our church family. And so starting today and for the next several weeks, we're going to do that. We're going to allow people from our church family to share their stories. We're going to start off this morning with Eugenia Garrison's story. And it's an awesome story, and we don't have the time this morning to let you see the whole thing. So we've edited some of it together to kind of hit the highlights. But I want you to get comfortable, watch the screen, and hear Eugenia's story of faith, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it.
I grew up in Church of Christ family. My grandfather and his 5 brothers were all preachers. My grandfather was what you would call an evangelist, and he traveled. You know, he'd go to this little town. We're talking about late 20s, 30s. He'd go to a little town and he might preach a week or two, and then he'd be on his way someplace else. Well, as far as his home went, his family, they might not see him for 2 or 3 months. My dad did not have a mentor, a father figure that he could follow. He was driving around Dallas at 12 years of age, doing what he wanted to. And that's pretty indicative of the dysfunction that revolved in our house, which was alcoholism. He was what you would call a binger. He would be home for maybe a couple of 3 months, and everything would be great. But where we lived was a dry place, and so I had to leave town to have a little toot. Only it never was just a little toot. It was a big toot. It was miserable at my house. My dad was a funeral director, and my mother took care of the office. His business was just dead. But it was just not a happy home. She was frightened because she couldn't count on him. You know, he'd be here today, gone tomorrow. Maybe for a week, maybe just a couple of days. But we never knew. He went off on a toot and had a terrible wreck in Memphis. We lived in Mississippi. And it was unfortunate because he was then the funeral director for the state of Mississippi. You know, they had an association. And this was a terrible blow for him. He wouldn't go back to where we lived. My brother and I stayed with an aunt and uncle in Jonesboro, Arkansas for 2 years. Didn't see him, didn't know what was going on. But when he came to get us, he took us to Texas. That's called a geographical cure. And so we went to Texas. And this man was in the most horrible depression you've ever seen. We lived with all the blinds drawn in a little bitty place. He didn't work. My mother did. And it was a terrible existence. A year after we moved there, I was 15 years old, and I ran away and got married pretty young. Married a guy by the name of Don. And after about a year, we had a little baby girl. Don was an aspiring electrician and was what you called an apprentice. When he got off from work in the evening, he and all the other electricians went to the beer joint. It was just the thing to do. He hung out with the guys. I didn't like it. I wanted him to come home. After this baby was about a year, a little bit older, I just left. Took her baby bed, and we left. I found a job and a person that would keep her, and we were off on our own. A couple of years later, I met and married Prince Charming. His name was Cecil. Cecil was the exact opposite of my dad. He was easygoing, quiet, hard worker, loved the baby, adopted her, and we had 2 more children. We did all the right things. We took the kids to church. We didn't fuss and fight. Just regular kind of people. But underneath, something was wrong. Always. For me. I remember standing in my perfect house, on the perfect street in the perfect area, thinking, I cannot think of anything else to want. And I'm in so much trouble because I'm so unhappy. So I just took to my bed, either that or my floaty out on the pool. But I cut off all communications with friends and just was horribly depressed. So I worked on Fridays. We went to more auctions, and I met the lady next door who had an antique store also. She and her husband often went to the same auctions that we did. And after about 3 months, she said to me, I have a meeting I want you to go to. And I thought, probably can't do that, Annabelle. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't go to meetings. I don't dress every day. Do you not understand? Friday is the day out and Sunday morning. Actually, it was Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. We did the right thing. And she said, yeah, I really would like for you to go to this meeting. I asked her what it was. It didn't register. And finally, one Friday night, she said to me, I want you to go to my meeting with me Monday. I didn't do Mondays. I said, I can't do that. She said, yes, I'll pick you up at 10. As we were going down the highway into Oklahoma City, I said, Annabelle, what is this meeting? And she said, it's Al-Anon. It's for friends and relatives of alcoholics. I rode along for a while. Couldn't figure out why I was going. We didn't have those people. Well, there'd been that one. And also my other grandfather. And now that I thought about it, I had an uncle. It's kind of weird. But we went to the meeting. And during the meeting, something happened for me. In Al-Anon, we would call it a spiritual awakening. Because not knowing or understanding anything about that program, I knew I belonged. I knew all these ladies knew what I needed and had it. So we went to lunch after the meeting, and I said to her, Annabelle, can I come back? I didn't know if you had to have an invitation. And she said, oh my goodness, Eugenia, do you have any idea how sick you are? And I nodded, not having a clue. She said, you'll go to a meeting every day. That was alarming. I didn't dress every day. What was I going to do? And so I told her, I said, Annabelle, I think I could make the Monday meeting, but I don't believe I can make any more. She said, yes, you'll make one each day. I'll pick you up so you'll know where they are. And that's how I started. Life was good, and the company that bought his bellied up. It was gone, all of it. Things started leaving. It was the beatin'est thing you've ever seen. There were no new cars. The airplane left. It just one thing after another. And Cecil told his sponsor, I'm going to have to take bankruptcy. He looked, and I called Annabelle, and I said, Annabelle, I'd really like for Cecil to drink. She said, why would you say such a thing? I said, because he made a lot of money when he drank. And we're about to starve. She said, why don't you just wait and see what God has in mind? So we moved to Van Buren, Arkansas. And through a whole lot of God's workings, he started selling ice cream franchises. Ice cream churn. They would put these things in places like convenience stores. And anyway, he and Mr. Bryant did ice cream churn. Well, Mr. Bryant knelt to pray one morning, and God called him home. That was the end of ice cream churn. What we were left with was no job, a whole bunch of equipment that they'd bought to put in a franchise, and no income. So we took the equipment, and he found that my little antique store had some interesting plumbing. He called the man that owned the building and said, what is this plumbing in the antique store? And the guy said, oh, years ago there was an ice cream shop there. I call it a God deal. He moved my antiques right out of there, brought that equipment up, and started dipping ice cream. Never seen a happier guy in your life. He said, I knocked myself out all those years just to try to make a living. If I had turned my life and my will over to God years ago, I would have had this ice cream shop a long time ago. That was just one of the God deals. Along the way, I got another great old big house, and this time I got to redo it, restore it to its splendor of days gone by. and put my antiques in it, or at least part of them. And we lived there and just loved it. It was just wonderful. It burned on New Year's Eve. He said, we had the biggest bonfire you've ever seen in your life. Everybody came. We enjoyed that big house. In fact, on our way to the fire, we stopped the car to pray. And his prayer was that we knew the house had been given to us by God, that we had gotten to do it the way we wanted to. We'd enjoyed 5 years there. And if he was ready for us to leave, it was his. Thank you for this time. And it just was okay, you know. Cecil died very suddenly. And I had an ice cream shop that lots of people helped me. You know, a couple of years after I got to Al-Anon, I said to Annabelle, why on earth did you ask me to go to that meeting with you? And she said, I knew you had an alcoholic that you grew up with. I said, how could you know that? I had never told her anything about my family. I didn't tell anybody. She said, because I loved you so. I knew you were just like me. I'm one of the fortunate ones. Because God sent Annabelle. You know, angels in disguise.
She was
one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about what Max Lucado said. He'd learned how to do this from a Pentecostal preacher. He learned how to do that from a Baptist preacher. He learned, and he had them all listed. And I thought, I learned how to talk to God from a little old Episcopal woman that was mean to me. She was wonderful.
Yeah.
I still do it. She's dead, but I think she might come back and haunt me. And yes, I go to 4 meetings a week. And if somebody needs me, I can go to another.
I don't think Eugenia's here this morning, is she? Okay. That is only a piece of her whole story. And just so you know, we're going to, at some point in the near future, have the whole story online where you can hear the whole thing. It's an amazing story. Some of the stuff that she mentioned, you know, she talked about dealing with alcoholism in her family and depression in her family. And it wasn't that she planned to have that in her life. It was just something that she was born into and had to experience. I mean, she lost her husband unexpectedly. She didn't plan for that. Losing her home in a fire and choosing to see that as a blessing and as an opportunity instead of something to be upset about. She would even describe, you know, her choice of leaving her first husband. May not have been the best choice in the world, but God did something good with her life anyway. Matter of fact, if you end up watching the rest of the story, that relationship came full circle. They reconnected years later. But there's so many different things from Eugenia's story that if you watch the whole thing, you're going, I mean, even from what you watched this morning, if I just walked around this crowd and said, what'd you get out of what she had to say? We'd have a dozen different answers of things that stood out to you about Eugenia's story. And the first thing that I want you to understand is this is wrong of me, I'm confessing. My first perception, when Eugenia first started coming to this church, my perception was this sweet little Church of Christ lady who always does things the way that all church people have always done them, and she's, you know, just like anything that we might do to push the envelope a little bit, she's going to have a problem with. Like, there's just a certain way you do things, and just this church, I know y'all are laughing because that's not the way she is at all. I never would have guessed until I heard her story that she had this kind of mess in her life. And yet God has brought her through those things and has used her to bless other people. I want you to hear that. That's us. That's part of our church family. That's part of who we are. There's one thing in particular that I want to bring to your attention this morning. One thing that I want to focus on very quickly, and we'll wrap up today. But I want to focus especially on her connection with her friend Annabelle. Annabelle got Eugenia to go to Al-Anon, and she didn't even give her a choice. She's like, you're going. She helped her find purpose in her life again. She was this person that became Eugenia's source of encouragement and wisdom and a shoulder to lean on. You heard her describe herself. That's an angel in disguise. That's how she came to feel about Annabelle. And that's what I want us to pay special attention to this morning and recognize that we all need someone in our lives like Annabelle. And it could be anybody, but somebody that can help us manage this life. And maybe that's a spouse, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a co-worker, maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's a trusted friend, maybe it's several of those people, but we all need somebody. God has designed us to get through this life with other people, to manage this life with other people, not to try to figure it all out on our own. And I want us to recognize this morning, I need someone in my life. I need someone in my life who, first of all, will be blunt with me. I need that person. I need someone who's going to be direct and going to be honest and blunt with me when I need to hear whatever it is that they're sharing. Not somebody that's going to be a bully, not somebody that's going to just boss me around, not somebody that enjoys being able to tell other people what to do. But somebody who genuinely cares about me and cares enough about me to be direct with me if it's something that I need to hear. Annabelle did that for Eugenia. Annabelle said, you're going to this meeting. You need to get out of your house. You need to do better than what you've been doing. Eugenia needed to hear those things. She needed to hear it from somebody like Annabelle who cared about her. There's a story in the Old Testament, a very familiar story to a lot of people about a guy named David. And David at one time had everything going for him, was making all the right choices, very successful, doing everything very well. And you get to the book of 2 Samuel in chapter 11 and 12. We won't read the whole story today, but in chapter 11, you find out that David ends up having an affair with a woman, and he's about to get caught in that affair, so he ends up having her husband murdered, and then takes this woman to be his own wife. That's a really abbreviated version of that story. But what I want you to see is what happens in chapter 12. David has a friend named Nathan, and Nathan shows up at David's palace. He's the king over Israel, and he shows up at the palace, and he says, man, there's this guy who had a whole bunch of sheep all his own, and there's this other guy that only had one, and the guy that had a whole bunch went and took the guy's sheep that only had one, and he cooked it and ate it. And David's furious when he hears the story. And he says, who is it? You need to tell me who that is right now. We're going to deal with this right now. And Nathan's answer in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 7 is, you are the man. And he goes on in verse 9 to say, why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You can't get a whole lot more blunt than that, folks. David, you're the guy. And you have failed colossally. This was the completely wrong choice. Why did you do that? And I want you to understand, as direct and as blunt and as honest as Nathan was to David, David needed to hear it. He needed someone that he trusted to be able to confront him. As a matter of fact, years later, David's own son Solomon wrote these words in Proverbs chapter 27. Verse 6, he says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. You got people who don't care about you. They'll just tell you whatever you want to hear. And they'll say yes to everything. And they'll just try to make you feel good about yourselves. But sometimes that person in your life that truly cares about you will say something that hurts. And they're not saying it to hurt you. They're saying it because you need to hear it. You can trust those words. You can trust when somebody that you care about is blunt with you, is direct with you. I know that I need somebody like that in my life. I need somebody who will challenge me to move forward. Those times that Eugenia felt like giving up or not even trying, she had Annabelle in her corner saying, you can do this. Let's keep going. Let's keep moving forward. And I need somebody like that in my life too. Somebody who will push me to to do better, somebody that will encourage me to improve my life. And if I fail, if I fall down, will encourage me to get back up again. David, that we just talked about a minute ago, had a friend, Jonathan. And Jonathan at one time was with the Israelite army, and they're camped across from the Philistine army. And the Philistine army has so many soldiers you couldn't even count. The Israelite army only had 3,000, and they're just kind of sitting and waiting, and nothing's happening. And Jonathan gets fed up with it. He's like, I'm going to go over there and fight them. I'm just going to go. I'm going to go attack a whole bunch of, you can't even count how many there are, but I'm going to go attack them. And he's got an armor bearer with him. And if you're the armor bearer, you have to go wherever your guy that you're bearing armor for, wherever he goes. You got to toss him a sword. You got to throw him some arrows to fill in his bow. You got give him a shield. If he drops a shield, you're the guy that picks it back up. You go and fight side by side with him. No matter where he goes, you go. And sometimes that job was a fairly thankless job. And sometimes the guy that you were bearing the armor for, you didn't really want to follow him where he was going. Jonathan says, you know what I think? I think I'm going to go over there, and I think I'm going to go attack all those guys, and I think God's going to give me victory. Jonathan's armor bearer says in 1 Samuel chapter 14 and verse 7, do all that you have in mind. Go ahead. I am with you heart and soul. This was the perfect opportunity for the armor bearer to go, Jonathan, man, let's think about this for a second. You don't even know how many guys there are. And those are all skilled warriors. And I'm not saying you're not a skilled warrior, but there's one of you and hundreds upon hundreds of them. Let's hold off. It's not what he says. He says, hey, man, let's go do this. I'm with you. I think you can do this. Not only do I think you can do this, I'm going to join you in it. We need people like that in our lives. People that will challenge us, people that will encourage us, people that will push us forward. The author of Hebrews says in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24, let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. And the concept there with this, when he uses the word spur, is basically to take a cattle prod and get something moving the direction that you want it to go. And it's not that he's saying we need to annoy each other and poke at each other until we start doing the right thing. He's saying we need to urge, sometimes push, challenge each other to move forward into doing what? Good stuff. And to be more loving, and to finding ways to be a blessing to other people, and to finding ways to make our lives better, and finding ways to make other people's lives better. I need somebody in my life that will challenge me to do that, because I know me. I'll get discouraged myself, or I'll assume before I even start that this is going to be a failure in the first place, so I won't even try. I need that person to say, hey, let's go do this. Let's move forward. I'm with you, heart and soul. I need somebody to walk with me through the difficult times. I need that person that's going to help me make things better and do things better, and also is going to walk with me when things get worse. When I fail, when things don't go the way they're supposed to, when life just happens, I need that person that's not going to just tell me, you know what, just get over it, it'll be fine. I need that person that's going to recognize this is hard. This is difficult what I'm dealing with. I need that person that's going to stay right with me, maybe even carry me through that difficult time. Going back again to David one more time and his buddy Jonathan. David at one point in his life was an outlaw. Jonathan's dad was king, and he was trying to kill David. And he's threatening his life, and he's threatening his family's life. And David ends up having to run for his life and be constantly on the run in his own country. He has to move his family to another country so they'll be protected. And he's out in the middle of the wilderness in a desert with no food, no provisions, and no country to call his own. He's miserable. And it says in 1 Samuel chapter 23 and verse 16, Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. I have no idea what that conversation, all the pieces of that conversation, I have no idea exactly what Jonathan did, but Jonathan showed up and made things better. Jonathan didn't show up and go, David, what's your problem, man? Why? He's such a whiner. Jonathan showed up and said, this is hard, but we're going to get through it. And whatever he said, whatever he did, it renewed David. It gave him strength. It renewed his faith. Jonathan didn't tell him to get over it. Jonathan walked with him through it. And I need somebody like that in my life too. I need somebody in my life that will love me no matter what. Annabelle loved Eugenia. That was the word she used. I loved you so. She loved her no matter what. And she loved her enough to want something better for her. But she also loved her enough to stick with her, even though she didn't necessarily want something better for herself. There was never an expectation when I sat with Eugenia, she told the story. I never got the sense that there was an expectation on Annabelle's part for Eugenia to be perfect. Annabelle loved her no matter what. And folks, I need that kind of person in my life. And so do you. We all need somebody who will accept us as we are, even if what we are isn't very pretty. Even if what we are is a complete mess. Even if what we are is worse now than it ever used to be. I need somebody that's going to love me through that. Want things better for me, challenge me to move forward, but love me no matter what. I need that person. Peter said in 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 8, above all, love each other deeply. And here's why. Because love covers over a multitude of sins. And I want you to understand what Peter's saying here. He's not saying love makes it like no sin ever happened. Love makes it like the failures were never there. He says love just covers it up. Love looks past it. I love somebody so deeply that when I look at them, I don't see flaws. I don't see failures. I don't see mistakes. I don't focus on all the things that they've messed up on or feel bad about. I see them. I see this person that I love and that I care about. And folks, I need somebody like that in my life. I need somebody whose love for me can cover up and look beyond all the ways that I mess up and all the ways that I fail, and who will love me no matter what. I need that person in my life. And you do too. But not only do I need this kind of person in my life, this person that'll help me move forward, that will challenge me, that'll be blunt with me, that will love me. I need to figure out a way to be that person in somebody else's life as well. Jesus tells a story in Luke chapter 10 of a guy who got beaten up and left for dead on the side of the road. And he tells a story, and there's people that see the situation and walk right past it, don't do anything about it. And there's one guy that stops and helps and goes out of his way to help this guy to get him to the medical attention they needed, help take care of him. And after Jesus gets done telling the story, the person that he's telling the story to, he looks at that person in Luke chapter 10, verse 37, and says, you go do the same thing. Go and do likewise. That could be the same thing that Jesus would be saying to us about the people that we need in our lives. We need people who will be blunt. We need people who will challenge us. We need people who will walk with us through difficult times. We need people who will love us. But at the same time, I want us to hear the voice of Jesus saying this morning, you need to go do that for somebody else. You need to sometimes get your eyes off of you and go see who around you needs that person in their lives. And that's not to say that we need to just interject ourselves into somebody's life, that we need to walk up to them at work or after church and go, guess what? I'm going to be your person. Probably going to be awkward and weird and might not work very well. They might even do everything they can to avoid us and keep us from being that person, right? But we need to be aware. We need to have open eyes. Look and see who's the person in the cubicle next to you at work. Who's the person in your neighborhood? Who's the person that's sitting a few seats down from you in the bleachers while you watch your kids play their soccer game? Who's the person in your own family that desperately needs to be loved and accepted where they are? That desperately needs somebody maybe to be direct with them, but be honest with them and blunt and loving. Who desperately needs somebody to recognize they're going through struggles and I'm going to walk with them. I don't have all the answers. I don't even know what to do, but I can be there with them through it. Who can I be that person for? Who needs me to be that person in their life? And if you don't have that person in your life, Start asking God for it. God, send me somebody. And give me open eyes to see it when they're there. And if you don't have that person that you can be that person for, start asking God for it. God, open my eyes. Help me see who needs somebody. And get me out of my comfort zone and out of my bubble to go be that person for somebody else. Lots of different things that we could learn from Eugenia's story this morning, but I just wanted to focus on the fact that we all need somebody. And we all need to be somebody else's somebody. And here's the last thing. You guys done an outstanding job paying attention this morning. But I want you to understand the things that I just talked about, the being blunt and direct and challenging and walking with, through difficulties and being loving. We find all those things in Jesus. And I know that sounds like a really churchy thing to say, especially at the end of the sermon. We're getting ready to sing a song. We're going to stand up together. And we're going to ask people to share if there's something that's missing in their lives, that's on their hearts that they want to share with this church family. I get all that. And there's some of us that are like, man, just wrap this up. We got Mexican food to eat. We got places to go after this. I get all that. But folks, I mean this with as much sincerity as I can possibly muster. Jesus fills all those needs. Every single one. Every single time. One of the things that he says about himself in Luke chapter 7, verse 34, says, the Son of Man came eating and drinking. You say, here's a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we could pull out of that verse. We don't have time for this morning. Here's the one thing I want you to see that Jesus says about himself. I am the friend of sinners. That's great, because I happen to be one. Do you understand how important this statement of Jesus is? I'm not just a friend of church people. I'm not the friend of people that have their act together. I'm not the friend of all the people that put on the face and want everybody to assume that everything's just fine in their lives when it's anything but fine. That's not who I can connect with and have this relationship with. I'm the friend of people who are sinners and who can be honest about that and who want something better. I'll love them no matter what, and I'll make their lives better if they'll allow me to, but I love them where they are. I am their friend. My Savior is the best friend you could ever have. And if you don't have him in your life, today's the day to change that. If you used to have him in your life and you walked away from it, today's the day to change that. We're going to stand together in just a second. We're going to sing a song about how much we need Jesus in our lives. We need a friend like him. We need a Savior like him. And I would invite you, I would encourage you, if you have walked away from him, if you have walked away from connections with people who care about you, and you've tried to live life on your own and try to act like you've got everything together and don't need anybody else's help, I would encourage you to be honest about that this morning and go, I can't do this by myself. I need somebody else. I need to start with him. If that's your desire, if that's your prayer, if that's where your heart is today, I invite you to share that with us. Come forward and share that with us. While together we stand and sing.
I need you more than yesterday. I need you more.